Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing a bit of a mechanical autopsy on a massive financial catastrophe. We're going to look at an absolute economic miracle that literally, in the blink of an eye, transformed into a devastating, algorithmic global contagion.
So how exactly does an economic miracle become a global contagion? It's a pretty wild question, right? I mean, think back to the summer of 1997. Thailand wasn't some developing nation just struggling to find its footing. No, it was the ultimate success story. Economists were holding it up as the absolute gold standard of modernization. So what went wrong beneath the surface? How does a system that's celebrated just collapse so spectacularly?
Part 1. The Asian Miracle. Let's start with the gleaming illusion of absolute perfection that defined the rise of the tiger economies. We're talking places like Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, and Malaysia. For over a decade, the growth in these regions was absolutely staggering. GDP was growing at nearly 9% every single year. Bangkok saw this massive construction boom that literally in a single generation transformed farmlands into gleaming office towers, luxury hotels, and massive highways. You had a rapidly expanding middle class, and the foundation underpinning all this confidence, safe, stable currencies that were perfectly pegged to the US dollar, which basically means the government guaranteed their money would always trade at a fixed, stable exchange rate against the dollar, essentially eliminating currency risk for investors. I mean, it seemed completely flawless. And because things looked so perfect in a post-Cold War world, global capital went hunting for aggressive returns. Western banks, pension funds, investment firms, you name it, they all wanted a piece of the action. Between 1990 and 1997, the private capital flowing into developing Asia increased five-fold. A 5 times increase. That massive influx of cash happened in just 7 short years. Part 2. The hidden trap. Because right beneath those newly built luxury hotels lay a fatal mechanical design flaw disguised by a whole lot of easy handshakes. All that foreign cash had to go somewhere, right? But instead of going through rigorous, boring banking checks, a system of crony capitalism took over. Capital just went to anyone with a project, as long as they had a relationship with the right people in government. You didn't even really need a viable business plan. You just needed the right connections. This whole setup entirely bypassed basic due diligence, standard creditworthiness, and, crucially, any real risk assessment. Fast forward to 1996. Export growth slows down, and currency speculators spot a glaring mechanical vulnerability in those currency pegs. So they kick off this relentless loop. Step 1, borrow the local currency, the Thai baht. Step 2, immediately sell it for US dollars. Step 3, just wait for the baht to inevitably fall in value. And finally, step 4, buy the baht back at a much cheaper price to repay the original loan and just pocket the difference as pure profit. It was this perfect algorithmic loop designed specifically to drain the central bank's foreign reserves dry. Part 3, Anatomy of a Contagion. Now, a central bank can only spend its finite dollar reserves to fight off those speculators for so long. Eventually, the ammunition simply runs out, and gravity takes over. On July 2nd, 1997, the Thai government essentially ran out of money. They were forced to float the baht, abandoning that fixed guarantee we talked about and letting the open market dictate its true, much lower price. It instantly lost 15% of its value. This sent an absolutely chilling signal across the region. Hey, if it can happen in Thailand, it can happen anywhere. And it triggered a literal contagion. Rational investors totally panicked and pulled their money out of the entire region all at once. By late 1997, South Korea was nearing default. And by May 1998, the economic collapse in Indonesia literally forced President Suharto to resign, dissolving 30 years of authoritarian stability in just a matter of weeks. And the human cost of this mechanical failure? It was just absolutely devastating. In Indonesia, the rupiah lost 80% of its value against the dollar. 80%. Think about that. Inflation absolutely exploded. Food prices tripled almost overnight. Mass layoffs hit across the board because local businesses suddenly found it completely impossible to service their dollar-denominated debts. And this contagion certainly didn't spare the giants either. South Korea was an industrial powerhouse, a country of 46 million people and the 13th largest economy in the world. Yet, their currency, the won, fell so fast that by the end of 1997, the government was brought to within just $6 billion of total international default. Part 4. Cures and Capital Controls. Into this total global chaos steps the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, acting as the lender of last resort. But, as we'll see, their economic medicine was incredibly controversial. The IMF's standard prescription was, well, brutal austerity. They demanded the countries cut government spending, raise interest rates, and close insolvent banks, mostly to appease foreign creditors. But Malaysia? Malaysia took a radically different path. They completely defied economic orthodoxy. They imposed strict capital controls, fixed their exchange rate, and actually legally prevented investors from pulling money out of the country. And the really fascinating outcome here, Malaysia actually ended up recovering faster than its neighbors. Meanwhile, the results of the IMF's high interest rates were pretty disastrous in places like Indonesia. Raising rates right in the middle of a collapsing economy just pushed bleeding, vulnerable businesses straight over the edge into bankruptcy. Indonesia's poverty rate, which had steadily fallen to a really impressive pre-crisis low of 11%, suddenly surged right back up to 40%. An entire generation of economic progress was essentially erased in a single year. This stark reality led to some heavy criticism. Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, who was actually the chief economist at the World Bank during the crisis, argued that Washington's theoretical certainties completely missed the mark. He pointed out that they applied solutions that protected the foreign creditors while leaving the local populations of Jakarta, Seoul, and Bangkok to pay the devastating price. Part 5. The trillion-dollar scar. By the early 2000s, these economies finally began stabilizing and growing again. But the governments of Asia drew one absolute unshakable conclusion from all this carnage: never again. To ensure they would never again have to depend on foreign goodwill or be subjected to brutal IMF conditions just to survive a storm, Asian central banks fundamentally changed their behavior. They started hoarding foreign exchange reserves on a scale the world had literally never seen before. Today, those combined reserves exceed $7 trillion. That staggering number is quite literally the scar tissue of 1997. The warning ignored. See, as Asia healed and learned its lesson, there was this glaring, flashing warning sign that the rest of the world completely failed to learn from, even though it was lying right there in plain sight. The warning signs were almost too familiar. You had unregulated short-term capital moving freely across borders to fund long-term assets. You had massive leverage hiding deep inside a complex system, and you had contagion moving algorithmically, way faster than human understanding. A full 10 years before the 2008 global financial crisis brought the Western financial system to its knees, this exact architecture of disaster was perfectly demonstrated across 12 Asian countries. Almost no one in the Western rooms where it mattered was really paying attention to the Asian financial crisis. It leaves us with this haunting reminder of a very simple truth. It is incredibly easy to ignore a raging economic fire on the other side of the world, right up until the exact moment it reaches your own front door.